What is going on, guys? Savage here. In today's video, we're going to try to cram a lot of information in involving Warzone 2 and what all this information we have means for you. A lot has changed. It's going to be a drastic difference between Warzone 1 and Warzone 2.0. And I know a lot of you guys are wondering, how will this affect me and my time with Warzone 2? But we got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and dive into it. First and foremost, I want to go ahead and talk about Al-Mazrah. I think I'm pronouncing that right. The map is beautiful, by the way, really just loving it. A lot of people are complaining about, the lack of bright colors and things like that, but that may come. We don't know how early of an alpha it was. It may get brighter, but even if it doesn't, I'm not really against it. If you remember old school Verdansk, it was pretty dull and boring looking on the eyes. When they started adding too much brightness, it really affected a lot of people. A lot of us had to turn our brightness down. But anyway, going into the map, if you notice, the map's basically split into 3 different sections by the river. You have Al-Mazrah City, which is basically its own area. You have Tariq Village all the way down to Said City. And then of course, the last section being all the way from the Suwa Village all the way up to Hydroelectric and back down to Airport. Now, these are key moments that we're going to be talking about in a lot of our strategy videos. The map itself looked beautiful from the gameplay we saw today, just from looking at this image overhead. The map is absolutely gorgeous. I'm loving the different POIs. I'm loving how spread out the POIs are. And I'm also loving the fact that there's not just a giant peak in the middle of the map. There's not an overwhelming of skyscrapers like there was in Verdansk. There's not the giant peak like there was in Caldera. So at least they learned their lesson from both of those and they kind of toned it down. Let's go ahead and talk about combat and time to kill. Now, time to kill looks crazy fast. The new plating system, the way the plates work, the weapons, the fact that there's no loadout. Just from what we've witnessed, combat is going to be drastically different than it ever was before. I do believe Warzone 2.0 compared to Warzone 1 is going to require a lot more patience, strategy, and just mental awareness than it did in Warzone 1. We watched GOAT after GOAT just diving into fights, unrelentlessly 1v4ing enemies. I don't really think that's going to be the case in Warzone 2.0, and I believe that Activision did that on purpose. A lot of the casuals, a lot of the lower tier player base kind of just left because it became impossible to compete against higher KD players, which is definitely understandable. So I think all these changes in Warzone 2 is to kind of keep those players there. I do believe there still will be somewhat of a skill gap, but players will have to play a lot more patiently. And again, we saw that in a lot of people's gameplay today. Now, combat in the water system is going to be something in its own. I'm very excited for that. It's something we had in Blackout. It was a lot of fun. When it comes to Warzone, especially with time to kill, I don't believe you're going to see too many people in boats gunning people down because, again, time to kill is so fast. It really doesn't have much of a place. It wasn't utilized much in Blackout, and I don't believe it be utilized much in here. However, definitely will have an impact from you getting from one place to another if you're fighting the circle. Now, when it comes to the combat system, we're going to touch on weapons. We did notice a few key elements that's going to affect a lot of combat and a lot of fighting in Warzone 2.0 that we did not really have to deal with in Warzone 1. If you guys remember Warzone 1, because it's currently going on right now, long-range weapons are a huge problem. Assault rifles that can shoot all the way across the map, sniping, even SMGs that can shoot a good football field away really accurately with high rate of damage is real frustrating. It's caused a lot of people to start force stacking. It's caused a lot of people to start sitting in buildings and corners with heartbeat sensors. And it's really just kind of mess up the flow of the game. Not so much in Verdansk, but definitely in Caldera because how wide open the map is. Regardless of the amount of trees, it's pretty wide open and it's very easy to get beamed when you can't even see an enemy beaming you from across the map with an assault rifle. These changes include more weapon sway and more recoil. We saw recoil like we've never seen before in Warzone. Granted, we don't have the crazy attachments and the meta builds yet, but even compared to the base weapons, it was just wild. And if you guys were paying attention to the gameplay, if you noticed when a player was shooting, it wasn't just his gun bouncing, it was in his entire screen. It's almost like they gave the player full vibrations because the whole thing is shaking, which could create a little bit of distortion and make it harder for the person seeing to spot a little bit of movement. And with saying all that, basically that's gonna limit the range on a lot of guns. We saw a lot of players today take on a lot of long range fights with assault rifles and quickly decide that's not the fight they wanna do because of the amount of recoil and how difficult it was to control it at range. So with all that being said, it's going to be a lot of close quarter and mid-range fighting. Of course, you're going to have snipers, but I do believe because the amount of cover and concealment this map does offer without being too cluttered, I do think hiding from snipers or rotating around snipers and trying to get flanks is going to be a lot more possible than it ever was in Caldera. And last thing I want to talk about with combat is time to kill. Now, a lot of the fights kind of look like time to kill was a lot faster in this game than it was in Warzone. Regardless of what we saw today, remember, this is early alpha and things will change. If you guys have been playing Warzone since the beginning, you know time to kill has changed drastically from the day it was released to today. Warzone 2 will do the exact same thing. They're trying to implement a plating system that's similar to Blackout. There's going to be a lot of balancing the company's going to do in the first few months, talking about stronger plates, maybe weaker plates, maybe more base health, maybe less base health, and maybe again just changing the weapon damage. That way you don't die as fast, or maybe you die faster. So regardless of what we saw today, remember, I'm pretty pessimistic when it comes to Activision. I'm very harsh on Activision, but I saw a lot of promise in today. Just be patient with it. Let's see what the game offers. Let's give it a few months to start judging it hard. Combat's going to be a little different. Everyone's going to be on the same playing field. Again, we saw players today that are goated struggling in Warzone. So take this as an opportunity to go out there and try your best to get better at the game. That way you're on the same playing field as a lot of the goats are. And with combat, it's a perfect segue to talk about prox chat. Now, prox chat in what we watched today was a little wild, low voice, high voice. It was just all over the place. I do believe they're going to balance that out. And guys, if you haven't had the pleasure of playing a battle royale with proximity chat, or even a survival game with proximity chat, it is a blast when used properly. You're going to get a lot of toxicity, but you're going to have a lot of great moments. You're going to see a lot of funny moments interacting on YouTube and Twitch that are just going to give this game a lot more life. That's one of the best things about PUBG was the prox chat and the friends you can actually find from enemies you're fighting based on the vibes between that. It's going to be a good tool to kind of make friends because you can test their vibe based on what y'all are saying back and forth, party up, and you might end up finding a permanent teammate you might roll with for the next 5 or 10 years. Now let's go ahead and talk about the vehicles. A lot of changes to the vehicles, a lot of familiar changes for us Blackout players, a lot of new changes for everyone. It's going to be awesome. In Warzone, we do have brand new physics. Different vehicles drive differently. Also, explosions will affect different vehicles differently. It'll have a greater effect on an ATV than it will a Bertha, of course, but it's also how they handle. You can shoot out tires or slow down vehicles. Vehicles do run out of gas. And what I noticed today, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but when I noticed Bertha players compared to ATV players and buggy players, the Bertha runs out of gas a lot faster, which I kind of like to see. But you can repair the vehicles and you can also refill the vehicles with gas at a local gas station. And they even threw in an electric Hummer. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't see the Hummer play at all. I don't know if it's because it's electric, you don't have to charge it, if it's infinite, I'm not too sure. But let me know in the comment section right now if you guys have a little bit more intel on that than I do. All right, so the vehicles, guys, you could also lean out of the vehicles, which is huge. I love that feature. One of the things I hated about Warzone was the fact that we're just stuck inside. You can't turn around. You can't really have fun fighting vehicle versus vehicle. If you had one vehicle chasing another, the vehicle in the back with the squad, they were the ones that had the advantage. There was really nothing the vehicle in front could do. However, with the new system, it's kind of going back to Blackout. If you guys ever played Blackout, if you had the pleasure of playing Blackout, the vehicle fights were amazing. You had people leaning out, shooting in the front, shooting in the back, downing each other, going back, splatting. It was great. And I'm really happy to see it finally coming back to this game. Not to mention standing on top of vehicles, being able to shoot, doing all that, getting out of the vehicles to get on top. Huge change that I think is going to bring a lot more action-packed feeling to this game. Again, we didn't really see much action in the gameplay today, but I do think over time with the changes they're going to be making, with the player base being thrown into it, we're going to have a lot of fun moments. That was really an audible I wasn't expecting today, them throwing in a GMC Hummer. Also, guys, if you are enjoying the video and learning something new, make sure you leave it a like and subscribe to the channel today because we'll be posting more Warzone 2 content from here on out. Let's talk about the Gulag system. It's weird. It's really weird. It's a 2v2, but you don't need to have communication with your teammate. You don't have to work together. It's essentially just, I think it's a way for them to throw people in the Gulag faster so you don't have to wait. And I'm not really against that because there's nothing worse than your team in the middle of a fight, circles closing in, your loot's about to be out of zone, and you're just sitting there waiting for 15 people to fight in front of you. So I like the fact that people are getting thrown in together, but it does create a little bit of confusion, especially listening to footsteps. You hear your teammate. What happens if your teammate sucks and he backs out and now you're having a 1v2? I'm really confused about this. I'm confused how it's going to work, but I do like the fact that you spawn in with your fist and you're forced to pick up items around the map to kind of help you with that. I think it's a cool way for them to implement 2v2s into Warzone. I never was a huge fan of the ghoulie. I'm old school. I think one life, one death. That's all you get. But let me know in the comment section what you guys think about the new ghoulie. Until I actually get to get my hands on the game and play it, it's kind of hard for me to judge. But what I'm seeing so far, I give it a solid 5 out of 10, and that's just being generous. If you guys are familiar with my channel, if you're familiar with me, you know that I give a lot of tips and tricks on this channel. The whole point of this channel originally was to help newer players get better at BRs. I've got 7 years of BR experience. A lot of people, Warzone was their first BR, so I really wanted to get people to get better at the game, get a little bit more of an edge. With me saying this, there's going to be a lot of different things happening in Warzone 2 that most players can't even handle in Warzone 1. If you guys are familiar with a lot of different players, there are a lot of goats out there who have 6 KDs, 7 KDs. They can absolutely drop 20s and 30s, but they have less than 1,000 wins. A lot of you guys watching now have a high KD, lots of kills, but very few wins. It's about to get a little bit harder for players of that style. There's going to be a lot more strategy in this battle royale than there ever was in Warzone 2. If having strategy wasn't important to you in Warzone 1, if you're going to be playing Warzone 2.0, you're going to have to straighten up and get it together, because there's going to be a lot of strategy. We're talking differences between having no loadout and having to rely on the map to feed you that RNG factor to give you the loot that you need to go out there and win. If you're underlooted, how do you play? How do you rotate the circle? What position do you find? And also, speaking of the circle, that new 3 split circle was just absolutely wild to see. Kind of cool, kind of creative, very unpredictable. I'm curious to see how it actually affects gameplay over and over and over again. Because it goes from 1 giant circle to 3 small circles, I thought it might speed up gameplay. But what we watched today was complete opposite. Granted, again, it was a customs lobby with some of your best players in the world and a lot of content creators, but they just kind of hunkered down. You know, and it's their first game. People don't want to die. They don't want to be the first one to die in the very first Warzone match. But it got really slow paced, really quick. Common sense to me dictates that with 3 smaller zones compared to 1 big circle, it's going to be a lot more action packed, because all those players are having to force themselves to 1 zone. And sometimes you never know, again, with the RNG of where players are at, you might get a whole circle by yourself and the whole lobby might be over here in this next circle and they might all die out. It's going to be interesting to see how it affects the entire game. I felt like the game today lasted from anywhere between 30 to 35 minutes, when normally a battle royale lasts about 22 to 24 minutes. So the new skill gap to me will be strategy and rotations. The players that actually think about the map, like your irons out there, like me, like OP Mark, like Yeet, this will be the area they thrive in. But a lot of players that run and gun and just kind of rely on their skill and movement, it's gonna be a lot harder for them, because the skill gap on that is closing and closing fast, leading to movement. Movement has been simplified, which for players like me, you know, I love movement. I think it's a great thing that this BR was able to do. Warzone was able to implement their own type of movement into the Battle Royale system that has never really been seen before. Sure, Apex has movement, but Warzone has some crazy camera breaking movement that was really just crucial and was probably the biggest skill gap in the entire game. And that now has been removed. I'm still watching players like Jowo somehow whip around and have decent movement. But again, with that being removed, a lot of strategy and rotations are going to be coming into the place to kind of make up for that lack of movement. You're not going to be having people break cameras anymore. You're not going to be having people slide canceling, and the B-hops still are there, but they're not as broken. You can now dolphin dive, but you can't do it while shooting. If you slide, you have to complete the slide before you stop. I watch people try to find a way to finesse the system, trying to jump out of it, trying to ADS out of it. They seem to have locked down the fact that there's no slide cancel in the game. And again, for me, it's kind of a little heartbreaking. However, majority of players, I think this is huge for you guys out there who are struggling in the game, because it's already hard enough for you guys to have good reaction time, good aim, compete against devices that are way better than yours, PS4, PS5 versus computer, not having map knowledge, not having map awareness, also not having a good team to roll with, not knowing strategies. So now you have one less thing out of the game that's really affecting the majority of players from going out there, having a better time and winning. Now let's go ahead and address the elephant in the room and talk about loadouts. Huge change coming to the Battle Royale scene for Warzone, and a lot of people are pissed off, and understandably why. First, we're gonna start with the pros of no loadout. No longer do new players have to drop on the map and instantly worry about getting blown through by a squad with their full loadouts within the first few minutes of the game. Now, they have the blessing of the RNG factor, randomly generated loot, popping up around the map. And go-to players are gonna have to take a little bit more time to find the things they want before they get the confidence with their gear to go out there and start slaying out. It's a huge change. A lot of us, I'm not really happy about it, but I definitely understand it. Again, for the casual player, for your average player, and again, the low tier players. Instead of them dying instantly, getting blown through and having people go through the map dropping 50, 60 kills, it's going to slow down the pace a lot and allow these newer players, these bad players, to survive longer, maybe getting a little bit more fighting without dying instantly because they're able to go up against a good player who's got a bad weapon. And again, going back to Blackout, that was one of the best features. We were good players. I had almost a 7 KD in Blackout, but there were a lot of matches where I would land in a hot area and it would take me 5 or 7 minutes to actually find stuff that I felt like I was comfortable going out there and slaying out with. Some games instantly we'd just get blessed and we'd have a great match, but a lot of matches we were at a huge disadvantage just because we landed in an area we thought was good and it ended up not being good. And again, other players had the advantage because they happen to find better loot. Overall, I do believe this will level the playing field. I talked all that hype about the pros, but there's a lot of cons to this as well. Let's just go ahead and talk about what we saw today. We saw slower game pace, people using weapons they really didn't want to use. We saw people that are normally out there slaying out, dropping 20s and 30s, camping in the building, right? And again, a lot of that had to be with the fact that it was their first and second match. So I get that, but you're going to see that a lot with this system. Players, when they don't have the loot they want, they tend to play a lot more passive. Goated or not, they tend to play a lot more passive. So this is going to make the game a little bit slower. It's going to feel a little bit more like Blackout. Instead of dropping 40s and 50s, you'd be like, wow, I'm killing it, PR record pace. We might be talking more of like 30s, maybe at that. Time will tell as the game evolves. This video might not age well, but again, a lot of changes we'll have to implement into the game for people to go out there and start dropping 30s, 40s, and 50s with basic weapons that they find off the ground. However, you can buy a loadout gun at the buy station. It's really expensive. You only get a gun. You don't get perks anymore. You don't get any, you get a gun, but it's really expensive. So depending on looting, depending on, again, RNG of where all the money is at, you will have players being able to grab a lot of money, buy their loadout weapon, and move on. It's not one loadout for the entire squad. It's you buy a gun, you get one gun, and then your other team's got to fend for themselves. So it's going to be very weird. It's going to be very interesting to see how teams are able to incorporate that in teamwork. Who gets the gun? And again, you'll see the monetary system changing over time. So 6 months from now, a year from now, you may be able to get 2 guns each and you're able to go off from the map and slay out. But right now, I do think the game's going to be a little bit slower paced. Another pro is not everyone's going to be using the same gun all the time. Different attachments, different weapons, people just using what they can find. It's going to feel like less stale of a BR. There's nothing worse than going around during the NZ meta, and every time you got in a fight, it was the NZ, the NZ, the NZ. It got boring. It got just real boring. One of the worst things, in my opinion, with Warzone is the fact that when there's a meta, that's the meta. Granted, now it's more of an open meta, but prior to this season, it was the NZ, it was the Automaton, it was the Armaguerra, it was the Grawl, it was the Cold War AK, and it was what it was. You could try to use other weapons, but overall, if you played a good player with a meta weapon and you didn't have one, you probably were going to lose most of your fights. But finally, my overall thoughts for Call of Duty and Warzone. Call of Duty, I think they're taking a great step in the right direction. Multiple modes for a variety of gamers. I love that. I mean, Ground War felt like it was Battlefield, and it was great to see, since Battlefield basically screwed us over once and flopped. Now we have Call of Duty. If you guys love Battlefield, you'll love Ground War. It looks like it plays so well. And from what I saw today, I do believe Activision is finally implementing the things we've all been complaining about when it comes to all aspects of COD. I think we're getting a lot more attention to detail from Infinity Ward than we've ever gotten prior. And finally, Warzone 2. Overall, I gotta give the map a solid 9 out of 10. I do love it. I love the fact that it's split in different sections by a river. It's gonna create some interesting rotations and gatekeep positions when people are sitting in Al Mazrah City and they have to rotate across the lake and the bridges to see how they're able to counteract players. It's gonna punish campers a lot more. I didn't see any balloons today, so I'm pretty sure you're gonna have to try to find a way if you're camping in an area and you have to rotate across a lake. It's gonna be real interesting to see how players adapt to the actual strategy of BR. Speaking of strategy, strategically wise, which is something I'm known for, something I love from my PUBG days, my Battle Royale days, the OG days, strategy is huge. It should be the #1 aspect in Battle Royale. I think strategy is a solid 9.5 out of 10 with this game. The fact that there's now 3 different circles, That might stay, it might not. I think it brings a unique experience to BRs that we've never seen before. And honestly, I never even thought about that. But I never thought about once splitting the zone into 3 random circles and then instantly coming back in together. So that's a nice little feel. And again, it's going to change the strategy on the fly. If you think you've got the best position, guess what? You don't. And it's going to cause players to adapt. So I think, again, a lot more skill gap, a lot more mindset, a lot more strategy, and a lot more thinking going into your gameplay. Weapons, I gotta give it a 5 out of 10. Honestly, the no loadout system is gonna be real weird. It's gonna be weird seeing how people adapt. It's gonna be weird getting into close range combat. I don't really know exactly how they're gonna handle snipers. You're gonna see snipers. Snipers gonna be a thing. Do we need to have one on every team to counter other snipers now that we can't really shoot back with an AR? It's going to be interesting to see. Didn't really see a huge variety of weapons being used in this alpha, but again, it's early alpha. The looting system seemed a little whack. I got to give the looting system a solid 5 out of 10 too. When people die, their loot spreads out, but I did notice in tight hallways, the loot stacks like it did in Battlefield's Firestorm. And if you guys played Firestorm, you know how bad that was. Again, we'll see changes over time, but I did notice that. Also, opening crates, having to scroll over and click different things was real different. And we saw a lot of goated players die in the loot today trying to pick up items. And overall, my final evaluation of what I saw today, I got to give Warzone as a whole a 7 out of 10. Just from everything that I named, I think there's a lot of potential here. I think this is great groundwork for the future to come. We have 3 years with this mode. We have 3 years with all these modes. Very excited to see what the future holds. And again, when you guys are watching this gameplay, you have to think back to Verdansk in its early days. I remember the first few weeks in Verdansk, it was real. We were all bots. Everyone was bad. There were a lot of things we hated, we loved about it. A lot of us came from Blackout, so it was a massive change. I hated Warzone when it first came out because it was so different than Blackout. Shoot, I was going from streaming Blackout 12 hours a day to playing Warzone for maybe 3 or 4 hours for the first few weeks until I finally got the hang of it. So with saying that, and again, I'm a huge pessimist when it comes to Call of Duty. Keep your hopes up, because when we first launch into here, a lot of us will hate it. Seeing the gameplay today, a lot of us are gonna hate it, but things will change over time. They will fine-tune aspects of this game to make it more enjoyable, to retain the player base, for them to make more money, for us to have more fun, and it just goes hand in hand. But if you want to stay up to date with all the updates coming out, all the news with Warzone 2.0, make sure you subscribe to the channel today. And also, if you guys want to learn about tips, tricks, and strategy and rotation from a Battle Royale player who's been in the scene for 7 years, I've been doing this full-time for 6 years, make sure you subscribe to the channel today, because when it comes to strategy, that's one of the things that I excel in the most. But until next time, man, y'all have a good one and get ready for Warzone 2. Wolfpack, again, thank you guys for watching the video in its entirety. I really appreciate all the support you guys have given the channel over the past 3 years. Thank you guys so much for the constant growth and the constant laughs. Again, the purpose of this channel is not just to make people laugh and hopefully enjoy the spectating, but also to teach you guys to get better. If you guys would like some other videos related to this, make sure you click these videos over here. But until next time, man, y'all have a good one and good luck in Warzone.